Better fasten your seatbelts, Kage.
You got him, Mr. G.
Excuse me, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Hi, excuse me.
Yeah?
Yeah. We need you to take your seat. The fasten seatbelt sign is on.
This one's gonna put some proper G-force
Yeah.
into your facial expressions.
We talking from dial-up to hyperdrive.
Teranode's gonna steal the show, but it's not gonna steal the Centbee Show.
Straight up, yo, it's part of the show, yo.
We've got 1 million transactions. It's gonna give crypto the knockout punch.
Say goodbye to slow blockchains, yo.
We've got a Bitcoin bullet train that's gonna be pounding through.
Everything is blurry, Mr. G. We're going in high speed, yo.
If you want to know something, you've got to go to the source.
Yeah.
Of course, you can go and read the news, but as the famous philosopher Denzel Washington says,
if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed.
but if you watch the Centbee Show, then you're very informed.
The real plug, Mr. G.
Plug me in.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's one thing you're going to get when you watch the Centbee Show, and that's a lot of truth. And sometimes truth can hurt.
Yo, it's quite painful, Mr. G, because, you know, people always have this idea that the truth needs to fit their narrative. But it's never the case with the truth, you know?
You can't handle the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody wants easy wins. It's like, where can I quickly make a quick buck?
But remember, the quicker you get it, the quicker you lose it as well, man.
Easy come, easy go.
Straight up.
That's right. Well, I guess this is going to be fun, Kage. We got a damn good show for you all today.
You really do, yo.
We've been talking about Teranode on this show for ever since there's been a show.
Ever since.
We've been really excited about Teranode arriving on the scene because, you know, there's one thing that we haven't seen yet in the whole blockchain space, and that's real scale.
Yeah.
Something that can cater to the whole wide world. You know, when we look at these politicians talking about crypto reserves, crypto asset reserves, cryptocurrency reserves,
Yeah.
none of those cryptos can actually do anything. They can't scale.
But nobody's telling them that, Mr. G, but us. We've been saying that, you know, these guys can't scale. The cryptos are not usable. They have no form of value or anything. So, yeah, we've been saying that like from day one. So it's not like we've been also pushing the fake narrative, Mr. G. We've been keeping it real, yo.
Keeping it consistent.
Scoreboard don't lie, son.
Straight up.
There's one main theme in crypto to make easy money.
Yeah.
And that is what everybody is selling. When you look at the crypto asset reserve, when you look at people who are behind the marketing for the crypto asset reserve, if you look at all the big guys, even the Larry Finks,
Yeah.
they are all telling the world that this is a way that you can get rich.
Yeah.
And it's this dream, this shortcut that doesn't exist. There is no shortcut to riches.
There isn't. We've said it like even for the longest time, Mr. G, that, you know, true wealth lies in building. You know, having to be innovative, creative. And it's pretty awesome because the BSV blockchain is a new ground for, you know, such ideas and fresh approaches, yeah?
All right, cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Centbee Show. I'm your host, Lorien Gamaroff, and my co-host is KG, 1 million transactions per second in Ntshingila. KG, welcome to the show.
So, Mr. G.
Yeah, we've got a very exciting show for you today. We're going to be speaking to the director of the Teranode project at the BSV Association.
Yep.
Teranode is something that we've just been super excited about, and it's that missing part of the puzzle which makes Bitcoin finally something that the world can use. So we've invited Siggi Oskarsson, and Siggi is a very distinguished looking gentleman.
He could disarm you with his looks or his hands. Either way, he can speak French in Russian. He is the most interesting man in the world.
Definitely has a lot of technical chops.
Yeah, oh, most definitely, Mr. G. I mean, like I said earlier on, that he's been in the space for the longest time. So it's pretty exciting to have a chat with a person like him who knows what's going on in this space.
He's been involved in a lot of BSV company projects.
Yeah.
There was Tonic Power, which is an advertising platform, marketing platform on BSV.
Yeah.
I don't know if that project is still running, but every now and again I see on Twitter a post or something, and when you click on it, you go through Tonic Power. And the interesting thing around Tonic Power was that you get paid to view advertising. You get small amounts of BSV.
Jeez,
So it
imagine
flips
that.
the model around.
Yeah.
He worked on that project. He also worked on ARC at Tal.
Yeah.
Tal is a very interesting company. They're a massive BSV miner and other crypto miner. And they've been a significant company putting out information and software to help companies like Centbee be able to use the blockchain. Siggi was involved with that too. So he's got a really great track record in BSV.
Yeah, Ms. G. And what I like is that if you check out like the projects that he was involved in, they are more also trying to leverage on the whole scalability of BSV blockchain. Because, I mean, imagine having, you know, like people getting paid, and we're talking microtransactions here, you know, just for viewing ads. And it shows that, you know, with that model alone, there will be a lot of transactions. It shows like he's been trying to sort of like demonstrate the power of BSV all along.
That's right. He's been stuck in there, and it's so important to have people like that in the space who are not shilling crypto. You know, people who are actually looking at the technical problems around Bitcoin, because even though Satoshi gave us a perfect protocol, the whole idea was that when version 1 was released, it was set in stone. The protocol was perfect, at least good enough. It doesn't need any tinkering. But just because the protocol exists, it doesn't mean now that we've solved how to scale Bitcoin. That is now a technical problem, a software problem.
French software.
And so this is the exercise that now needs to happen, is that we need to figure out how do we implement Satoshi Nakamoto's protocol so that we can process an unbounded number of transactions. And we're going to ask Siggi now today some of these questions. Also, there's interesting questions around what's called simple payment verification. And something interesting that I've been hearing about, this concept of the metanet. You can replace, as far as I understand, the entire internet with Bitcoin by using this concept of the metanet, where you have transactions and overlay networks, which we will certainly get into, and you can now create a better version of the internet. And so that is fascinating to me, and I'm looking forward to see if Siggi can enlighten us on that.
Yeah, most def, man. This is exciting, Mr. G.
All right, Kage.
Mr. G.
Let's bring the man of the moment on.
Let's do that, Joe.
All right, Mr. Siggi Oskarsson, welcome to the Centbee Show.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
It's great to have you. You know, we've been talking about Teranode on this show just about every episode for the last 70.
For the longest time,
Something that's probably the most exciting thing that's happening in BSV. As you've said in one of your interviews, you're finally proving Satoshi Nakamoto correct that Bitcoin doesn't reach a scaling ceiling. And so we're super excited to have you on the show here. And you can just tell us what's been going on at Teranode, where you are with the whole rollout. I know that Teranode is listening. It's not officially live, so it'd be nice to know when that's going live. So I think we can get stuck in.
So as you might know, we did the proof of concept last year in May, and we did I think 1.1 million transactions a second. And I think we cracked the problem of scaling a node. But after that, there was a lot of work needed to be done because it was just a proof of concept. So we needed to write a lot more tests, do edge cases and things like that. And especially putting things on mainnet now, we've been syncing with all the old data, and there's a lot of strange transactions on chain that we'd have to process. So for the last, 6-7 months, most of it has just been quality work, like working on the quality and the stability and things like that. There's some changes that we've made that are a little bit bigger, like, but it's mostly due to stability and hardening it and things like that. So it's all just making it ready to be released. Because if I'm honest, we're just a little bit afraid that we'll be made fun of because this is really, really hard and we're doing our absolute best. But, you're juggling, a lot of things at the same time. So you oversee something. If you miss a tiny little detail, you're going to be made fun of on X. And so we're trying to prevent that.
Jeez, isn't that the truth? That's a tough crowd out there these days. You can't just build something. You're going to have to face all the haters. But as we always say, if you're getting hate, it means you're doing something right?
Definitely. You gotta be hated.
Cool, Kage, do you want to dive in?
Sure. Yeah, Mr. C, you guys have been in this space like for the longest time, especially you. I mean, you have a lot of cool projects under your belt. But I would like to understand, why BSV blockchain? I mean, there's other blockchains out there you could have easily chosen, but you went for BSV. Why is that?
In my mind, there is only one. I got in. So I was working at a corporate. I think it was 2013, and I think my brother Ole, who's also now working at the BSV Association, introduced me to Bitcoin because he got it a little bit earlier than I. And I was just trading, right? The price was going up. It's very exciting, and you're buying some of Mt. Gox and all that stuff. And but because I was in IT, I started digging into the protocol and what was it actually all about, the Bitcoin. And I just fell in love. It was the most interesting thing I had seen in 15 years in IT. Because, building websites or database applications, stuff like that, it gets boring after a while. So this was super exciting. So I dove in. And I was never on the forefront. I did write some applications around that time, and it was a little bit on the Bitcoin Talk forum, so you could probably find some messages from me from that time. But I'm basically a lurker. It's the same on X. I'm reading much more than I'm writing. And then when everything started up, the small block, big block discussions, I think it's 2015, 16. None of it made any sense to me. And it didn't start to make sense until the narrative around BSV started to form. At first BCH and then BSV, and it just makes sense because if you understand the system, like I tried to do in 2013 and 14, started to learn everything about it I could. The narrative at the time and this whole idea of a store of value and how it's run, that BTC is run today, it just doesn't make any sense. And in my mind, the Satoshi Nakamoto created a brilliant product at this time, and there's no need for the rest of them. They're trying to improve on something that doesn't need to be improved on. So it's a very very fundamental thing. And if you'd ask like, is there anything else I would like to invest in or put my time? No, there's nothing else. Zero, literally nothing.
Straight.
That's dope, man. Because we share the same sentiments. We only recognize one blockchain, and that's that.
Yeah, and just going back to the point you raised there, which everybody's trying to improve on Satoshi's design, but it's not so much improve. It seems more like they have different goals and different agendas. If you look at BTC, it's not that they are trying to improve Bitcoin. I mean, they don't care about signatures. They implemented segregated witness, which removed the signatures from the transactions. In our mind, that breaks traceability, at least proof of ownership. You need to have something digitally signed. So is it that what crypto is doing now is it's trying to move away from what Satoshi created, this enterprise, government-regulated system?
Yes, definitely. And I think what you just mentioned about SegWit, I didn't start dig into that until a little bit later. I was always against it because it just didn't make sense. But if you really dig into what it is, it's the biggest bait and switch ever. It's the dumbest upgrade I've ever seen in my life, and that people, but this is I think this is an important point though, because it's actually, they haven't actually made anything smaller, because the blocks are 4 megabytes. The amount of data you need to transfer between nodes is still the same. Nothing's changed, but like you said, they've broken the chain of signatures. So there's no benefit. There's only negative effects of what they actually did. But the narrative is so strong that people think this is an upgrade until today. So but I think that's a very good example of how strong these narratives can be and how the narrative has been controlled around Bitcoin and BTC. I mean, the SegWit is really, it's the craziest. It's not an upgrade. It's a downgrade. It's a crazy thing to ever have been implemented. Blows my mind every time I think about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the goal there was to also enable Lightning Network, which is supposed to be Bitcoin's Teranode, right? It's supposed to make transactions cheap and fast and scalable. And what's your opinion on Lightning then?
I think I'm not an expert on this, but it's like basically network theory, right? You're creating all these nodes that you need to find a path through the network. It's a complicated mathematical problem that it doesn't really have a solution. So it's the narrative around that is very nice. You have this extra thing on top, and therefore you get scalability, blah blah. But it actually doesn't work, and I think it's been proven many times mathematically that it's not going to work. But it's very difficult to the narrative is so strong again there that it's difficult to negate that. Again, it's the same thing. Lightning Network is not going to work. And this is the same thing that a lot of blockchains are also doing with layer 2 blockchains. You're basically pushing the problem out. That problem that Satoshi Nakamoto actually solved in 2008, and I think it's is when it really started. I think he started in 2008, didn't he? It's the end of 2008. Is the double spend problem, right? It's the Byzantine generals problem. That solution. You introduce a layer 2, you basically make that, again, you just shift that problem up to somewhere else, make that problem. And the same thing with this Lightning Air, we're just creating a new problem that's already been solved. It's crazy.
Like I always say with lightning, it's just, lightning that will never strike. These guys are just pushing, they're just pushing a narrative that will never materialize, But,
Yes.
There's something that, our viewers would fully like to understand, that what is Teranode and how does it actually relate to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So there's some misunderstandings about that. Is that we've got the current node, the SV node, which is of course is a fork of what the BTC Core node is now. So that's the original Bitcoin node. It's been changed and it's been improved. And Teranode is just a new implementation of the same thing. We're just basically trying to build a blockchain, and a blockchain is a chain of blocks with lots of transactions in them. There's lots of mathematics involved, but we're just trying to implement it in a different way. So instead of have you one computer that's doing everything, as SV node needs a big computer to run on, we split that up into multiple smaller, we call them microservices, and so they can run on multiple computers. And we can make use of all kinds of things like cloud storage and cloud databases and scalable databases. So we can do a lot more. The design from day one. So this is not new. We're not doing anything new. We're not changing anything in the protocol. We're not changing anything in the transactions of the blocks or anything like that. But the design from day one was very, very scalable because of what's being used in Bitcoin with the UTXOs. So every transaction has inputs and outputs, and these outputs are unique, and they're used as inputs for the next transaction, and that's extremely scalable because you can process that all in parallel, and that's what we're doing in Teranode. We're just parallelizing everything. So that's actually one of the difficult things about implementing Teranode is everything is parallel. So when you're testing it, everything is going all over the place, and one single transaction is split into multiple things and processed by multiple computers. So that's one of the hardest bits of implementing this whole thing. Just get your head around what's going on internally. But I think we've cracked it, and we've got a good implementation now. But it's important to emphasize, it's just an implementation of a server node that's running the Bitcoin protocol.
Mm-hmm. And there was an interesting interview that you had with CoinGeek where you said, Teranode's been in the works for many years now. I remember 4 years ago, I think, at a conference demonstrating 50,000 transactions per second. It's been many, many years. But in that interview, you said something interesting. You said that to be able to now get this breakthrough where you can now have minimum 1 million transactions per second, you had to break some assumptions around crypto, let's say, or rethink or reimagine how to develop this node infrastructure. But I'm interested to know more about those assumptions that are in some way restricting other blockchains and that Teranode now can move beyond. So what are some of those assumptions?
Do we really want to tell them our secrets?
You can tell us.
Well, the biggest thing the surprising thing actually that these nodes do, and I can't say all of them do that, but the ones that are based on the original Bitcoin node, is they're processing everything multiple times. So when a transaction comes in, it's validated, it's processed, and it's put into the mempool. If it doesn't fit, it's put into the orphan mempool, and later back into the mempool. And when the block is created, it's processed again. So this transaction is being validated and processed multiple times, and everything in Bitcoin is basically block based. So that's why the mempool is so important, because these transactions are put into the mempool until they're in a block, and after they're in a block, then it's processed into the database. So it's not done that until it's actually in a block. What we put on its head is that idea. We process the transactions directly in the database. with the assumption that because somebody created this transaction and actually signed it with a digital signature, it's going to be included in a block. And if another miner doesn't do it, we're going to do it. So we process that immediately into the database, into the UTXO store, put it into something that we call a block assembly to create the block. But it's not the same thing as a mempool. And then when the block actually comes in, we just clean that out and start with the transactions that haven't been mined. So this is changing that idea. So we're like transaction first instead of block first. That's the paradigm shift there in what we're actually doing. There's a problem. There's a big problem there, though, is if you have double spends. Because if I process all these transactions into my database and somebody else spends the same thing, the same outputs of my transaction into something else, so I have to do that, or somebody else does that twice, you have something called double spends. And we have to process those. And that's a bit nasty. But we've implemented that seems to be working very well, and we're testing that extensively. But if you imagine what we're actually doing is, instead of processing the whole block every time a block comes in, we're just processing the little bits of things that are conflicting. We call them conflicting transactions. So that's the double spends. So we're just trying to do. It's a similar to thing. I think I learned this from accounting once. If you get an invoice from somebody, you should touch it once. You scan it, you book it from somebody. You should touch it once. You scan it, you book it. We put it in the UTXO store once. We put it into a block once. We're not doing anything again and again and again. But I think that's so we're not changing any cryptography. It's very dangerous to say something like that. We're not changing any cryptography or the protocol, anything like that. It's just that idea of transaction first into the database instead of block first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess where I was going was, one of the things you mentioned was because other blockchains are not able to achieve this scale. Because of that thing called the trilemma, the crypto trilemma, or whatever, or I guess the blockchain trilemma.
Yeah.
And in there's the idea of security, scalability, and decentralization. And people in crypto, people say you can't have all three. You can't have decentralization and security if you're going to have scalability. You can only have two.
Yeah.
But Teranode seems to have eliminated that trilemma.
Yep.
And I'm wondering how you get beyond that.
So there's a caveat there. We've eliminated it to a certain extent because we don't believe that everybody needs to run a node. So the idea of decentralization, when they're talking about BTC, they're running 3,000 nodes, and they think that's an important number. If you look at how many miners there are and how many computers are actually mining, it's a handful. I think, 80 or 90% of the hash power is in hands of 5 miners. So what is decentralization? Is it these 3,000 nodes that are listening and doing nothing, or is it actually just the 5 nodes that are mining that is important? And we believe the latter. It's the mining nodes. The rest of the nodes are actually not participating. They're leeching. And actually, we found some problems on some of the times when the SV node network is very busy. There's a lot of. I think we had a test a couple of weeks ago. It was 1,000 transactions a second. We noticed that the nodes weren't all syncing evenly between the EU and the US and Asia. And I suspect that has something to do with the fact that somebody has his Raspberry Pi in between and it's just not keeping up and therefore not propagating on the network. So turning that Raspberry Pi off would actually be beneficial for the network because it's not be sending transactions to a node that's never going to mine anyway. And so the decentralization. So the question that becomes is, how much do you actually need for decentralization? 1 is probably not enough. 2, 3, 5, 10. It's probably somewhere between 2 and 10. You don't need a lot because if you have these big parties that are competing with each other, they're going to try to take the blocks first. And when you get down to those numbers, it becomes a lot easier to do the propagation between them. But we also did some new tricks there. We had to do some innovation around how transactions are actually propagated between the nodes. And we've actually proven in our tests that does scale. We first started our test with 3 nodes, but then we got some feedback back from the industry that said that's not really a decentralized network, it doesn't count. So that's why the test at the end was 6 nodes for 2 weeks. And we noticed there was absolutely no difference in running 3 teranodes or 6 teranodes on a network, because because of the scalability, linear scalability, we could just scale up a part of the node from the microservices. It was a little bit more network traffic, but like the core parts, like the transaction validation and the block assembly and block validation, things like that, they were the same, because we're not mining more blocks. We have more nodes on the network, but we're not mining more blocks. So we look at decentralization slightly differently, to come back to your question about the trilemma. But the way we implemented it also in Teranode is this, the thing that will actually matter is the propagation between the nodes, because now you're sending more data. You're not sending it to 3 nodes, you're sending maybe to 10 nodes, or maybe if you have 30 nodes, you have to send it to 30 nodes. And we have actually changed the way that the nodes talk to each other. So we're not using the old peer-to-peer protocol that Bitcoin uses, but we're using old-fashioned HTTP. So if you're actually requesting transactions or blocks from another node, you just do an HTTP request, and therefore you could put something in front of that, like a caching proxy server or a Cloudflare, or like a CDN, content delivery network. You can do all kinds of things to scale the network up actually a lot. So we haven't actually started testing how far we can take that, but we're pretty sure that we've not reached any of the limits in that area.
Yeah, and you said something interesting there, that if there's thousands of nodes, that actually can have a debilitating effect on the network. I know there's this concept of what's called a Sybil, a Sybil node. Is that what you're talking about? And what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, that's but it's like an intermediary. It's like it's not the same as a man-in-the-middle attack, but it is a node on the network that's connected to other nodes and is actually messing about. You put it somewhere like that, and then you would get into you mess up the network, and this is exactly what we saw a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, I think the way I understand it is that it creates congestion, and it actually degrades the network, because now there's not a fast propagation of transactions. If you have a slow computer on the network, it means the network is only as fast as the slowest machine.
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly what we saw, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, see, there's simplified, payment verification. But, a lot of people don't know what is that. And we'd also like to understand, like, how does it work within Teranode?
I think you mean the SPV is this is interesting. People think that we're introducing that now as well, but of course it's been in there since 2008 in the white paper. So I think it's chapter 8. I always say it's chapter 5, but I think it's chapter 8. I remember that incorrectly. No, so we're not changing anything in Teranode. It's the same thing. It's been there since the beginning. I think what the interesting question to ask yourself is, why is it in there? Why is SPV in there? And if you want to be a little bit more technical, ask yourself the question, why do we use Merkle trees? When we have a block and we're hashing the transactions into the block header, why do we do that with Merkle trees and not just a linear hashing of the transactions? And the answer to all of this is, of course, scaling. I mean, this stuff was put in there in 2008 to be able to scale Bitcoin, because otherwise there's no reason to have it in there. It's just that now it's just overhead because of 1 megabyte blocks. You don't need any of this stuff. But SPV is basically a way to prove that a transaction. So if we were doing peer-to-peer, and I have a transaction and I give it to you, I can give you a proof that the inputs I'm using in my transaction have actually been mined into a block. And I think Darren Kellensweiler, Degen, has done a lot of work on this with the beef format. I don't know if you know about that. But then you can actually, if I just got this transaction from Lorien and I want to send it to Kage, then I would have to prove that Lorien's transactions wasn't changed. So I can take that proof back, many transactions. And then we can have a peer-to-peer transaction, a peer-to-peer exchange, and you can actually see, hey, yeah, what Siggy's giving me is valid. It's been mined into a block, and I can accept it as a payment for coffee, for instance. So I don't have to go back to the network and wait for confirmations or anything like that. There is, of course, a caveat there, is that you don't know if the UTXO has been spent by somebody else, if there's a double spend or not. But those are also things that we're working on improving in Teranode compared to the SVNode network. Is that the miners are in Teranode, miners are they're sharing all the transactions with each other. There's no exception. So the network overhead is a little bit more than on SV node actually, but they're sharing everything. And if they come across a double spend, they will output that on a peer-to-peer channel, and anybody can listen to that. So it'll be much easier to detect double spends than it is today. So SPV, peer-to-peer exchange with using the simple payment verification, is going to be much more reliable in Teranode than it is in SV node. But the principle is the same. That hasn't changed.
I mean, it sounds like Teranode isn't just about speed.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's going to be more features available to developers and enterprises, a better way to run the network in a more resilient, robust way.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Another thing you mentioned was the peer-to-peer transactions. Of course, Bitcoin, the title of the white paper is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Yeah.
And this peer-to-peer thing, it seems really important when it comes to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about trillions of transactions per second, I imagine that's what Teranode is aiming at eventually.
Hopefully after I retire.
Hopefully not that long away. You don't seem that old yet.
Now you still need to put your hands in there, man.
Yeah. Don't think about that. So this whole idea of peer-to-peer cash, being able to send a transaction directly to another person. Obviously, there needs to be a connection to that person to be able to be peer-to-peer. And I think that's now when we talk about IPv6, this new IP format where we can have as many IP addresses as there are devices and people on the earth.
Yeah.
I know that IPv4 is limited, and that's what the world seems to largely run on at the moment. But to achieve that peer-to-peer cash system, clearly we need now that IP address system, IPv6, so that we can connect to each other directly. But I've heard that IPv6 isn't ubiquitous at the moment. It's not like everyone uses, and every service provider, every ISP doesn't use IPv6. Do you know what the status of that is in terms of a rollout around the world? Because clearly if we don't have IPv6 everywhere, we can't enable peer-to-peer transactions everywhere.
No, I have to admit I'm not completely aware of the status everywhere. I know here in Europe, I think it's everywhere. I think all the ISPs have IPv6. I have, if I connect to my home network, I have a IPv6 address, and that I don't think it's not so far away for everybody having IPv6. I couldn't tell you exactly the status of that. But what I can tell you is we were trying to use something that's called IPv6 Multicast in Teranode, which is a feature of IPv6. So if you have IPv6, it should work. And on all the ISPs, so all the internet providers, all the hosting providers like AWS and Google and Microsoft Azure, they have IPv6, but they don't support multicast. And this is actually a problem for us, because we wanted to have the transactions being sent from users or from companies into Teranode to go for IPv multicast, which basically means you send your transaction once and the network takes care of sending it to all the different nodes that are all over the world, which is fantastic. It will save on bandwidth, it will be more reliable, be all benefits, but the AWS and Google and Microsoft Azure, they don't support it. They support it to a certain level, but not enough to be able to do that in Teranode. And this is actually a bit of a problem. So what we have now in Teranode, we're using the old peer-to-peer network to send transactions, which will not scale to the levels that we want to. So we won't be able to get to 1 million transactions a second like that. So that's actually a problem that we have to solve. I think in my mind, at least from the Teranode development. So I think probably ask you, Lorien, because you have the Centbee with the wallet. I haven't been working on that much, but the IPv multicast stuff is a problem for us. It's not working yet, and we are actually in contact with the IPv6 people from IPv6. Latif is leading that. And we're in contact with some consultants. We're in contact with people high up in AWS to try to help us with this, but we're just not able to get it through to that. We can get it working. There seems to be there's like the internet is all these layers of things, right? It's like network switches and gateway switches, all these layers of things. And it just doesn't go through all the layers down to where we actually need it.
I guess it's not that it's not going to happen. It's it seems to be a there is momentum
Yeah.
in trying to bring IPv6 on board globally, because the world
Absolutely.
needs it, right? We're running out of. There's not enough IP addresses out there.
Yo, Siggi, we keep talking about, 1 million transactions per second. Is that like the cap? Like, we're not exceeding that? Is that where we leave it at?
No, of course not. But we have, so that was the goal that we were aiming for now, 1 million transactions a second. And I think we've, in some of our tests, we managed to get 1.3 million. In some isolated tests, I think we hit 2 million. In the design of the node, there's one bottleneck. Everything is horizontally scalable, which basically means if you want to do more, you just add more machines and everything's fine. But the block assembly that actually creates the blocks is a bottleneck. And I have benchmarked that. So this is, you can take this with a grain of salt, is like a back of the envelope calculation, but I've benchmarked that on my laptop. You could take that to about 5-6 million a second, and then that starts breaking down. The problem is why we haven't done that is it's extremely expensive to run these things. So if we're not actually getting the transaction with the fees and we're not getting any income, we're basically just burning money on the servers because we're not getting anything back. And 1 million transactions a second, I think it will cost, with calculations, about $250,000 per month per miner. So we were running 6, that would have been $1.5 million a month just to run these 6 nodes. Thankfully, we just ran them for a lot shorter, but that's a lot of money. So if you want to try 5 million a second, that's almost just 5 times more expensive, because you have to scale up everything just times 5. And the design would allow for it, but this one bottleneck I think will limit us to about 5 or 6 million a second. So what we need to do is in the coming months, we work on this bottleneck and see if we can make that also horizontally scalable, which means we can, just put more machines on it. Now it has to be in one machine. But I'm pretty sure that's a solvable problem. And people thought that we couldn't do this, and we did it. So going further should be possible, to be very creative. But it's going to be very expensive to test it. That's also the problem. It's very expensive.
Right. It's great that you've had the funding at least to be able to push the boundaries this far. So that's really great.
Absolutely.
Obviously, when it becomes, when there are actually 1 million real transactions, then that 250,000 a month for a miner is made up in all the little fees.
Yeah, and we were doing that in AWS on on demand instances, they're called. So it's the most expensive because we needed to switch up, and we're all doing it for the short time. But a miner doing that with reserve, so we actually buy these instances for the whole year, or do it maybe in a co-location, or do something else, can probably do it a lot cheaper. But even at this 250,000 with something like 10 miners and 1 million transactions a second, it's profitable. The network will work. So there's no economic reason not to do this. I think that's one of the things that the guys in the other blockchains often forget. This is not just a technical system, it's also an economic system, and the economics actually do work.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That is the whole economics of it. It's that you want as many transactions as you can with the low fees. You can make up the cost of the mining.
Yeah,
that's the whole point.
It's justified.
Well, of course, it seems that you guys are definitely making the right steps, and at this stage, it doesn't seem like a brain problem. It's just really the funding of the experiments.
It's ka-ching.
Yes, exactly. We've been hearing about this idea of the overlay service. Can you explain overlay services and how they work, and how a company like Centbee, for example, can benefit from overlay services?
Yeah, sure. So it just to start off with, an overlay is not a layer 2. I think that's one of the things let's start off with that, because that's a different thing. An overlay is basically a filtered or a limited, smaller view of the whole blockchain. So you can imagine if we're sending each other a transaction, we're doing some transacting, or we're actually putting some auditable data on chain, we're hashing some data. It doesn't have to be a monetary transaction. And you wanna read that later. So I'm doing some accounting or something like that, and all my bookings are going on chain just to make sure I'm not cheating. You wanna read that out later. That's going to be very expensive for you to do with 1 million transactions a second. That's 600 million transactions per block. It's going to be very expensive to try to read that back. So an overlay is basically just a small layer in between that stores your transactions. So if I'm sending these transactions, my auditable data, for instance, I will send it to my overlay, it will store it, and that will send it to the network, to the Teranodes. And then the Teranodes will give the SPV proof that it was actually in there. And then when I need to go back and check my data, I only have to look at that small part of data that I have instead of the billions and billions of transactions that are on chain. And now you can get creative with that, because you could have tokens. If you have a stable coin or you have some kind of NFTs, you could have specific overlay that stores all the NFTs, like one sat. I think we already have one sat overlays. And for Centbees, for instance, that could be anything that goes into the Centbee wallet. You can have an overlay that just takes all the transactions that, and I'm pretty sure you guys probably already have that. So when you have your own database of the transactions that you are sending back and forth and all your customers have, that is basically an overlay. So I think most applications have been building these things, just integrating it into their applications and not calling them overlays. And the idea of an overlay is just, let's just make it official. Let's make sure that we're actually splitting that up from our application and from the nodes. And what we're doing at the BSVA is writing code that others can use for these overlays. So we'll have code that works, that's tested, that's been battle hardened, so we know that it doesn't have any security flaws, and then everybody else can build their applications on top of that and make it much easier. And again, this comes back also to the SPV thing. It's about scale. You don't have to use an overlay. You can read everything from a Teranode if you want to, but it's just going to be very expensive. And why would you? You don't have to. So there's also some misunderstanding about these about SPV, about overlays, about are we changing the network? We're not changing anything. We're adding things that make it easier to process the data at scale. So we don't need these things today. You can use a node, you can do all this stuff today. You can go to what's on chain, everything's fine. But at scale, it's going to be much harder. 1 million transactions a second, you can't do this anymore. And that's what we're trying to prepare for. And yeah, I think, but what you can do with the overlays, you can get a little bit more creative, because I know there's interesting things that you can make private overlays, private data. So if you have, for instance, you would have, I don't know, something stupid like a document signing app. And so you have documents that you need to upload, you need to hash them, you need to have digital signatures, something like DocuSign, but then on chain. You wouldn't want the documents on the blockchain for everybody to see. So you want to put them in your little private overlay. So the documents and the transaction data is stored in your overlay, and just that little hash of small information actually goes onto the chain. And you can take that further, like a stable coin could be an overlay, or and the interesting thing about overlays is you do not have the same double spend problem that you would have with layer 2s, because everything you're actually putting on chain, you're putting every single thing on the Teranode thing. You're just limiting what you're seeing. But you can actually have multiple overlays together in like a peer-to-peer network. So you can have a peer-to-peer network of your overlays. So for instance, if you have the one sat NFT overlay, we could have 10 of them running, talking to each other, and one in South Africa, one in Europe, one in the US. And they would talk to each other, and they would all sync data, but the data would actually be on chain as well. So it's a bit of a difficult concept, but I always like to think of it as just a filtered view of the blockchain, of the stuff that you are interested in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, very interesting.
Cool. Yeah, and also, there's the money stablecoin development. Seems like it's exciting on that side. Is that considered an overlay service?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, what they've done something very interesting, because they've taken the one sat ordinals. So the money USD stablecoin is actually one sat ordinal, but it's a multi-sig, so to speak. So you need 2 signatures to spend a coin. One of them comes from your wallet, and the other one comes from them. So you send your transaction to them, and then they co-sign it, and then they send it to the node network. And that sounds like a permission thing, and it is, because it's a stable coin. If you don't do that, you're not legally compliant, and you cannot have these things. So that's that. But it is an overlay, because they will store the transaction also there. So if you want to request it back, you could request it from there. So it is kind of an overlay with a twist. They've added this thing that they're co-signing. So adding a signature when you send it through the overlay. So that's an interesting thing, though, because now you can see this whole idea of an overlay. It makes it easier to work on the blockchain at scale. You don't have to worry about the rest, but you can also add features like this. You can add a signature. I think what they actually also do at MNEE, you don't have to pay the network fee. So you don't have to pay any BSV to make that transaction. So you send a partial transaction to them, they add the signature, but they also add the fee. So they add another input with the fee, and so that signature is whole. So it gives you an idea. An overlay is actually a very interesting concept. You can do much, much more than just a filtered view of the network.
Now, one of the things about Bitcoin was that it was always meant to be compliant and traceable and all that. But there was also an interesting feature in Bitcoin relating to what was called the alert system. And that was to alert miners if there has been a transaction that's been flagged as money laundering or something. And then the miners can then be alerted to it and then all freeze it or something like that. Now, is that also part of Teranode, this alert system?
Yes. So we developed the alert system, I think, end of last year into SVNode, but we developed it in such a way that we could actually plug it into both. So the same system is now plugged into SVNode and into Teranode. We've actually integrated it into Teranode, so it's a little bit more integrated into Teranode than it was SVNode, but it's definitely there, yes. And just to say that the alert system, I think, is very important to have on a blockchain if you want to have it legally compliant. And if you don't want it legally compliant, it's basically illegal. So what are you doing? I've never understood the discussions that are happening in this in the whole ecosystem about not this being a bad thing. Because if you go to a judge, you have to. This is not easy. You just don't phone me up and I'm going to do something. I can't do that. I'm not able to do that. But you have to go in front of a court or a judge, and you have to get a ruling, and then you get this piece of paper from the court that says, "Hey, this is supposed to happen," and then we have to comply. But can you imagine a miner not complying to something like that? If you have the biggest miners of BTC are in the U.S. I think it's Foundry and some others. I don't remember what they're called, but they're in the U.S. They're in their legal jurisdiction. And a judge tells them you have to freeze these transactions because they've been involved in illegal, and they're going to say no. That whole it doesn't. None of that makes any sense to me. And so something like an alert system is not. We're doing something different. No, we're actually just making it easier for ourselves to be legally compliant. We're not changing the blockchain. We're just making what needs to happen to be within the law. And blockchains that don't do it, they're just going to have a harder time because they have to do this anyway, or they end up in jail. It just baffles the mind.
Yeah,
it serves them right at this point because these guys, honestly, they don't want to have grown-up conversations like we do here on the PSV side.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? They're talking like children. Not your keys, not your coins, and all this other stuff is like, in what world are you living? This is not a cartoon. This is not how the world works.
Yeah, exactly. Now that we're on the subject of legal and compliant, I don't know if you got any opinions about this. It's a bit of a left field one, but Donald Trump, of course, now has the crypto asset reserve, and BTC is part of it, as well as a bunch of others. And there's no alert system in BTC. There's no accountability there. So are politicians going to wake up to the fact that they're holding, as you say, illegal assets? What do you think is the future of this idea of a government reserve of crypto?
I think the purpose of blockchain is to be a utility. It's not meant to be a store of value. So it's always going to be some kind of store of value. And anything that has utility is going to be stored, like gold. I mean, it has some utility in electronics and jewelry and things like that. So, but so that's always going to be the case. But I think just like the whole narrative around a blockchain, BTC being a store of value, and this block size small is a good thing, and your Raspberry Pi, these are all narratives. And I think this narrative is very pervasive also in Silicon Valley, and therefore that bleeds into, Elon Musk is also on board with this stuff, and then of course Trump and his administration. I think they are misunderstanding what this thing is. And being the small chain that we are, that can sound a little bit ridiculous to other people. That's fine, but I'd love to have discussions with, it's the same thing as this legal thing. Just because you say that you have code as law and all that stuff, doesn't mean that your penny stock is not going to get, regulated. It's just it's the same thing as penny stocks. People did this, was in the 80s and the 90s, and people have been trying to do this for years, illegal securities. And the regulators maybe move slowly, but they are going to wake up and they're going to see what's happening. I saw this coming 6 years ago, so I'm starting to be a little bit doubtful if it will ever happen. But no, that's not true. It is going to happen. It's taking a lot longer than I would like. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
You think that there's common sense in the world and that people will figure things out, but there's that famous phrase, the markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
Yes, exactly.
It definitely seems that the world is, crypto world is irrational.
Yeah.
Because as you say, store of value for something that has no use. At least Cardano and Solana and Ethereum are pretending that they can be useful, but BTC. Exactly.
But if you go back to, you just go to the Bitcoin Talk forum. It's online, Bitcoin Talk forum, I think .com, and Satoshi talks about these things. You can go and you can filter all the Satoshi posts and just read what he said about this stuff in the beginning. And he's explaining all this stuff. The Bitcoin scales is within law, and he explains how these things are supposed to happen. We're not doing anything crazy. And the only thing that we're doing is we're following Satoshi's vision. That's the only thing we're doing. And we're just trying to respect what this person created and what he talked about and how he envisioned this thing to be. And we're just trying to make that a reality. That's all we're doing. And getting all this hate from that and the censorship. I think Lorien is also, I don't know about you, KG, maybe asking on the Jameson Lopp ban list on GitHub. There's a ban list of everybody that has anything to do with BSV. This is ridiculous.
I'm still safe. I think I must just get to your level, maybe grade up a bit.
Must be it.
Yeah, well, at this point, I'm still safe.
Yeah, it's a badge of honor to be on the ban list.
Div.
Yeah, no, I was quite proud to be on that list. Centbee's on that list too.
And in fact, I think I should work harder just to get on that. Actually.
Exactly, you're not working hard enough, Kage. Proof of work.
You need to get your hands dirty, Poindexter.
Proof of work. No, but it's if you, I think somebody's said the other, it's a quote that the people that were censoring were never on the right side. And that's exactly, they were never on the good side. The good guys were never the ones that were censoring. And I think that's here as well. We're not censoring anything. If you want a discussion with us, that's fine. We'll discuss this with you. And at a certain moment, you can disagree on things like that decentralization point. You can disagree on that, but at least do it from arguments and not from, personal attacks and things like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So like you said, they don't want to play with the adults. They're still in the playground, in the sandpit.
Nothing makes sense that side, man.
Well, actually, can I say something about that? That's interesting because a lot of the team members on the Teranode team, they don't want to be public, but they've been here for a long time, and they also have very gray hair. These are old people. And they're behaving like adults. They don't want to be part of some hyped up crypto thing. They believe in this stuff, and that's why they're working on this. So that's also very interesting that a lot of the people in the BSVs are actually true believers. There's not a lot of us left, but the ones that are left, we are true believers, and we want to make this vision a reality.
Yeah,
proof of work.
100%. Okay, so I just want to go back again to the technical stuff. Now, you've been running your tests on AWS. because clearly it's easier to provision services, and if you don't want that server, you have another server. If you need to increase the bandwidth limit, there's a lot of nice ways to quickly bring up servers and do all that stuff on AWS. And of course, the final way that Bitcoin is run, it would be miners actually investing in hardware. And once you guys figure this out and you've got a nice recipe sheet and you can say, all right, miner, these are the specs, minimum specs, go for it. But I want to ask about something else, and this goes back to the architecture of Teranode, because you also have been working with a company called Aerospike. And so I just want to know, what are they doing to assist with the development of Teranode?
Yeah.
So the heart of Teranode, and the absolutely most important thing in Teranode, is the database, is the UTXO database. So the unspent transaction outputs. Those are basically what Bitcoin can you spend, right? That's the most important thing, and this is where Aerospike comes in, because it's not only important that is absolutely rock solid and very consistent, because you cannot have you cannot have records to, be corrupt, or that's extremely bad. But also has to be very performant, because we're doing a million transactions a second. So in our test in May last year, we were doing 3 million. This is where the Twitter or the X misunderstanding comes from. We're doing 3 million Aerospike database operations per second for 1 million Bitcoin transactions a second. That's where the 3 million number comes from. We weren't doing 3 million TPS. But with some of the changes that we made, we're probably going to have to move that up into 5 million. So we're going to be doing 5 million database operations for every million Bitcoin transactions. And Aerospike is the database that does that the most cost effective, because you need the least amount of servers. So there's a licensing fee, which is that's a little bit of thing that we've discussed a couple of times. Why do you want to put something in there that actually has a licensing fee to an open source project? But there's not really anything else that can handle this at the same cost, because you would if you do it with, we've tried something with Redis, we've tried with other large scale databases, and it just becomes more expensive because you need more hardware. So Aerospike, they stood out as the database that could handle the load, the massive amount of transactions and everything we throw at it. And actually, a fun fact is that what we do with Aerospike, we've actually implemented most of the functionality in something called Lua script, which is used in Roblox and a lot of gaming and things like that. So that was fun. So we can actually run these little Lua scripts on the Aerospike database server, which saves us a lot of calls to the database and makes it more efficient. But that whole stack that they kind of saved us. If we wouldn't have had them, it'd have been even more expensive to run a node, and I'm not sure we would actually made it. And they actually do scale up a lot more. They have clients and do more than this. So they will help us scale also in the future.
Okay, I see. Interesting.
Cool.
Well, I mean, those are the technical questions.
Yeah.
Kage?
You reckon I should ask him the Satoshi
Yes,
question?
we've got a question we ask all our guests,
Yeah.
and we want to ask you that too. And feel free to give us your opinion here. We've only got fans of BSV on the show, so you don't have to worry about sharing your mind.
Yeah. Well, the question is, do you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Like, have you met him?
Do you ever know anything for sure? Do you know? I mean, do you know that we're not living in a simulation? I don't know. I mean, we could be living a simulation. I think I do.
Yeah.
And I think I've had many interactions with him, and I have many interactions with many people, but there's only one person I've interacted with that actually understands all this technology, can explain it in a way that makes sense. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Is that
We're waiting for the name.
Yeah. So who do you think is Satoshi?
You just left us hanging.
You're
there.
just hanging. You say you've met him?
No, I'm just gonna leave you hanging.
Okay.
I think I'm getting into legal trouble if I say who I think it is.
Okay, cool. All right, but do you think you've met him and you think you know who he is?
If yes, but if, I mean, like you say, you never know anything for sure, but I'm like 99% sure that last 1% is that there is absolutely nobody else that comes even close to understanding and explaining Bitcoin in the same way, and has been doing it consistently since 2014. I think I'm not leaving myself there, but yeah.
Okay, but he's not dead, and he's not Adam Back, and he's not...
None of the cryptards.
Yeah, he's not a Japanese code ninja. None of that.
Or a dude in a hoodie.
A hoodie with a statue.
Yeah. Somewhere in a coffee shop.
No, but I think all these things, all those names, you can't take that seriously, because I mean, again, it's all documented. You can go back to the Bitcoin Talk forums, and these people like Adam Back are there, and they're talking to this guy, and they're misunderstanding it. I think the first thing that came when it came on I think it was the cryptographic mailing list. I think that's when it first announced it. Adam Back said this will never work. He pushed back. It's not. These people are not Satoshi. You can go back, and there's documentation about that. Yeah. So, no.
Yeah, I think what you can look at with all these possible candidates is none of them are pursuing Satoshi's vision.
Yeah.
You know, they're all pursuing some other visions.
I'm blind. I'm blind. I'm blind.
So clearly they can't be Satoshi, right?
No
Yep.
way.
Okay. Well, we're not gonna pry. But we respect that and appreciate that. But you know, we want to just thank you for your time. You know, it's been really interesting, and it's great that we can reach out to you and ask these questions.
Anytime.
Yeah, no, it's tremendously exciting watching Teranode grow, and you know, we appreciate all the work that you're doing and your team.
Thank you.
I know that it's not just you behind the scene. There must be, as you say, all these hidden people that have been, you know, in the trenches, just working tirelessly for all our benefit. In fact, for the entire world's benefit.
Such a selfless act, man.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know, we believe that you guys are cementing yourselves in history, and then one day when this whole crypto craze is over, and Satoshi's Bitcoin is the only Bitcoin,
It's realer than real.
there are certainly going to be people that we look back and watch the documentaries about, and you're certainly going to be in one of those documentaries explaining these things, and we really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Can I add one thing to that though? Because a couple of years ago, when I was I was building applications on BSV, and I was looking at, you know, all these other guys doing this great stuff, and all these, you know, crypto heroes doing all this, and I'm in the middle of that now. I have to pinch myself. It's like this is absolutely crazy. But one of the things that I learned from that is we shouldn't do that. We don't put anybody on a pedestal. Don't think anybody is better than you or doing anything like you. It's actually just about putting the work in there, and we cannot do it alone. We need other people also to put in the work and be there and help us do this. And there's, I think I see too often that the people are waiting for others. I did the same thing. I waited for years for others to develop Teranode, to come. Identity is something I'm very interested in. Identity standards on BSV, all this stuff, and it's not happening. And we have to stop waiting and start doing. We have to do things ourselves, and let's help each other get involved. Please get involved in the stuff that we're doing. Everything that we're doing is going to be open sourced, and just ask. No, I don't want to beg, but, you know, plead with people to get involved. Help us with the documentation, with teaching, with coding. We were just like everybody else a couple of years ago. We never thought that we would be in this position, and here we are. And whoever's listening, you could be next. Get involved.
There you have it. I mean, that's it on their head, right?
You can't get it better than that, guys.
You can't wait around. You can't hope that somebody else is going to be doing this for you. If you believe in this vision and you want to see Satoshi's vision on the world and benefiting millions of people,
Yep.
This is your chance. You can now step up and be somebody who also is formative in this history of Bitcoin. You know, there's a whole world of people out there who are just trying to deviate and move away from Satoshi's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You can be a soldier. You can be somebody who actually now steps out, does something to bring this vision closer, as Siggi has done and everybody else involved in the Teranode project.
Yeah.
So there we go. There's a call to action. And Siggi, you know, thank you so much for joining us here. We really hope to have you back again soon, and you can give us another update on how Teranode is doing.
Yeah.
We're going to be watching here. We're going to be commenting, I guess, on the sidelines. But more than that, we're actually going to be using the technologies that you are working on right now, because Centbee obviously needs to now get ready for Teranode.
Yep.
And the way we are doing it now, it's just not going to cut it. And so the work you're doing is so necessary and important. And we're on board. And we're going to be fighting alongside you in those trenches. And we know that eventually Satoshi's going to win.
It's going to prevail, yo.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Siggi.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Thanks, Siggi.
Okay, cool, Kage. Well,
Mr. G.
that was Mr. Oskarsson, the genius behind Teranode.
Yeah, man. That was a dope one. That was a meaty one, you know. And like we always say, man, we the real BSV plug, yo.
Exactly, and we're bringing it.
Only the best.
We're bringing all the important content that you need to know and understand to make it in this crypto world.
Yeah. You know how we do it, Mr. G. We keep it real here.
Pound that like button.
Yeah, you better, because actually we have 40% of our viewers not subscribed.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, come on, hit the subscribe button. 40%, yeah.
We're not monetizing the show. There's no ads.
Yeah.
All we want is one little like, one little subscribe. Come on, what you gonna lose?
Yeah.
You can boast about it one day when you say you were watching the Centbee Show right back in the beginning.
Straight up.
And now it's the #1 show on the interwebs.
I swear, yo. You guys better check the space, man. Show some love. Subscribe. Mobile money on fire.
You gotta pump up that mobile money fire.
Mobile money on fire, yo.
Yes. Cool. All right, Kage.
G.
I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for joining us here today on the Centbee Show. Please come back soon. We have to like.
What's up, bitch?